Sure.
Same. Okay, we're all live.
Hey everyone, welcome to the August edition of the Audio Programmer Meetup. Thanks so much for joining us today on the live stream. My name's Rachel Locke. I co-host this meetup on the second Tuesday of every month with my co-host Josh. Before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and thank our sponsors. Our sponsors are Juice, Focusrite, and Sonox. Thank you very much for your continued support. Another announcement we have is that ADC tickets are now on sale. You can head over to audio.dev and there'll be a button there saying tickets available now. You can follow that through to Eventbrite to get your tickets for ADC in November. Also, if you would like to apply for the diversity scholarship, you can head over to audio.dev/diversity. And there should be an option at the bottom of the page there to apply, fill out a form and apply for the diversity scholarship. I'm going to hand over to Josh now, and he's going to let us know who we've got speaking today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rachel. And like Rachel said, tickets are now on sale for the Audio Developer Conference. If you head over to audio.dev, you can get your tickets now. There are special prices for students and for people who are involved in academia as well. This will be a conference that's happening both in person in London and also online on November 14th through 16th. And the first day will have a number of workshops. This is really exciting. I've been going to ADC for the past 4 years now. Actually, it's where I met Rachel the first time when she was working with the Juice team. And yeah, it's a great place to meet other people. I think I met Dave at ADC first time that I met Dave. And yeah, it's a great place to be. So yeah, hope to see some of you there and grab those tickets. And with that, we will kick off into our first talk with Dave Rowland and Sudara Williams. So Dave is the head of engineering at Tracktion and Prism Sound, and Sudara is an independent developer at Melatonin, and they're going to unveil an extension on a tool that Dave has been working on for a couple of years now called PluginVal, which is a great way to test your plugin. And he's going to explain a lot more about what that actually means. And now they've teamed up to extend this to a tool that can be used online. And so I will now give the mic over to Dave and Sudara, and we're excited to hear this talk. Take it away, Dave.
Hi. Yeah, so the news from my side is that as Josh said, I've been working on PluginVal for a number of years as a tool to help people test their plugins. So me and Sudara have been working together to update that to a version 1 status, and I'll just list through kind of essentially what that means, a brief bit of background on what PluginVal is used for, and then we'll kind of go over to the more fun new stuff. So bear with me for a second. So PluginVal is essentially a Juice 7 plugin host that will load plugins and call functions on them. Its primary use is for test coverage. So you can load a plugin and ensure all its functions are called. So that includes opening the GUI, closing the GUI, getting the strings of all the parameters, all the areas that might not necessarily get called in kind of day-to-day use in a traditional DAW. And it also does a bunch of stuff like testing for different block sizes and sample rates, and will simulate parameter changes whilst processing. You know, all the kind of things that a DAW might do for you, it tries to do in a really condensed, quick way. This can help find lots of bugs. I've seen bugs from lots of commercial plugins where if you just happen to call a parameter that's really high that people don't often, you know, that code path just hasn't been tested. So this is a good way to kind of get that. It also uses more kind of traditional test tool methodology. So you can repeat the number of tests, so you can run them continuously for a period of time or a number of iterations. You can randomize the order that things are called in, so that can kind of simulate different environments. But any randomization is deterministic, so it can run its own random seed, or you can provide it with a random seed. So if you get a failure on your CI, you can then run it locally and probably reproduce the issue. So it can be used in 3 rough sort of modes. There's a very quick kind of scan, really. Well, it will just run through the basic set of plugin functionality. Then there's the kind of plugin API conformance, I kind of call it, where it will try and do pretty much everything that a plugin API can do within reason. And then there's a sort of extreme mode stress testing environment, which will do lots of different things on different threads to try and really stress test your plugin. And that can be a good way to find edge case bugs or bugs that are caused by multiple threads. And that can lead to also kind of, timing issues. You can use it in different modes. There's a kind of front-end GUI mode where essentially a plugin list that you can scan for plugins and then test those. It can be used in also a command line interface as a kind of command line tool, which is really useful for running things on CI. And you can also use it as run it via the command line from your IDE, so you can just make it a target and continuously run it as part of your development process. So that's kind of the background and what it's for and how it can be used. If you want to find out more about how you can implement it into your toolchain, go to the PluginVal GitHub, which I think Josh will put the address in somewhere. And there's more information and some documents to show you exactly how to implement it into the various different ways. There's a few new things that have been added in version 1. So the first of these is that the command line interface has been slightly simplified. A few of the flags have been removed because they're no longer necessary. And you can now just call PluginVal, so the app name, and then a path to a plugin, and it should do the kind of standard validation process. We've removed the validating in a separate process via the command line because it's not really needed if you're running via the command line. You can just call it multiple times if you want to scan multiple plugins, and that gives you better stack trace reporting as well. There's improved login and information messages. So if you're trying to do something and there's a failure, it might give you more of a hint as to why that's failed and how to go about fixing it. And there's also improved plugin API conformance. So VST3 has some threading restrictions that it now conforms with. There's also a couple of new features, I guess. The first one is that if you're running validating AUs on a Mac, it will now call Auval automatically for you. So rather than having to have 2 separate tools to run Auval and then PluginVal, it will just run that and then spit the output to you if Auval fails or if you add the verbose flag. And similarly, if you provide it a path to the VST3 validator app, it will run that and give you the output of it. I'm currently looking into whether we can bundle the validator app, but I'll need to look into the licensing and see whether it conforms. I think it might do because as far as I'm aware, you can use it under the GPL, and because PluginVal is GPL, because it uses Juice under the GPL, I think that all fits together, but maybe someone who knows more about licensing can tell me yes or no on that. On the back end, we've improved the CI process. So if you want to get a good idea of how to do GitHub Actions, Sudara has done a really good job of kind of moving everything into really nice GitHub YAML. So that's really nice now. And it now, from PluginVal to validate itself, it now builds the Juice plugins that are in the Juice repo and validates those. So it kind of dog foods itself so we get CI passes. And there's a lot of CMake caching going on in the back end with GitHub Actions. So the build times have rapidly improved. So that might be something you want to look at as well. So that's kind of the big news on PluginVal front. The release went up today, so go ahead, grab that and check it out. But the other thing I wanted to say is this is kind of a real testament to open source and community development. I think Sudara contacted me, actually he pestered me for a while to do some stuff for PluginVal, but I finally kind of made a bit of space and said, okay, what do you want to kind of to do with this? And we've just been working together mainly through Discord and also GitHub pull requests and things to work on it together, really. And this is actually the first time we've met. This is also the first time we've even spoken kind of vocally. So, you know, great things can happen if you just reach out to people and get involved in projects. That's what open source development is all about. And PluginVal is an ongoing project. If you want to contribute to it, pull requests are welcome. I can't guarantee that I'll be able to get to everything immediately, but you know, if you make a good case, then I'm sure it'll raise up the priority list. So that's kind of things from my end.
Fantastic. And I'll just interject very quickly before we turn it over to Sudara and talk about and just very quickly emphasize that people always ask on our Discord community about ways to find new job opportunities and to get experience with audio software development for prospective employers. And what you were talking about is probably one of the best ways that you can actually do this, which is contributing to open source projects such as this and getting involved. A lot of times people feel that there's that they're not ready yet for that, but I think that it's important just to get in, get your feet wet, try to be productive, try to find something that you can contribute to, or even just reading through the code, making suggestions. Just getting involved in the community is a really great way to gain that experience to where you would be able to start doing this for a company if that's your ambition. So yeah, it's awesome. And with that, I will turn it over to Sudara.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I guess so. I worked with Dave on, I guess, modernizing this this CI pipeline, so making sure that everything is built in the cloud easily. It's testing itself, it's dogfooding itself, and but yeah, the context. I think the bigger context here is that I'm a plugin developer and a musician and a synthesizer lover, lots of synthesizers, and I'm building a synthesizer. And so I have lots of tasks. I have to do UI and design and all the DSP, and it's an indie operation. So it's like, why am I suddenly pulled to this other task? Is it necessary? Is it important? What is, how important is validation and all that? And I just wanted to say, from that bigger picture context, I think this tool that Dave built is amazing and such a gift to the community, because the landscape with plugins is really kind of hairy. Like, you're dealing cross-platform, you got Mac, you got Windows, you got Linux, if you can invest the energy to do it. And then you have all the different programs like Logic and Pro Tools and Ableton and across all these platforms. And there's already frameworks like Juice behind the scenes making life easy for you. But when it comes to actually testing your plugin and making sure it's going to work when you ship it out to users, then it can get pretty nasty. And the last, you don't really want to do all the work building a product and then at the very end find out you have all these complicated things you have to unravel. So I'm a big believer in automated testing to help solve that problem. What it does is it bubbles up all those issues, right into your face right away as soon as they occur, so that you can just fix them and move on, and you're not going to ship your product and have a user run into those and find out the hard way that you have something wrong. And so PluginVal, what Dave's built, really stress tests your plugin and make sure to kind of bubble up all, it does fuzz testing. It really can hammer it and make sure all these weird edge cases will bubble up, and you can tackle them ahead of time. So I really want to help with this project. And I also have been spending a lot of time with automated testing in general, my own plugin that I'm making, which is a synthesizer. And so I helped build the backend, and somewhere along all this work, I was like, it would be pretty easy to to run a service where it just sends these plugins off and gets validated, and you can just drag and drop on a website. Okay, so like 80 hours later, here we are. And it was actually quite hairy, but yeah, I think it was worth it, because I think the more that we can get plugin devs to sort of check this tool out and see what it can do for them, lower the barrier, make it friction free, the better, because it really will save plugin developers lots of time and headache if this happens up front. And I think the ideal case actually is, if you get a little taste about what validation can do for you as a plugin dev, you can build it into your CI pipeline most ideally, so that it's running all the time and it's just catching stuff as you add the bugs, and you can just immediately handle it. So I think that's the ideal case. I have an example of that on GitHub of a kind of an empty plugin app that has all that set up. If you're doing open source, then you can just use GitHub Actions to do that for free. And that's great. So you can sort of get all this experience setting up this pipeline and having everything test. And then you can actually just focus on your product and not worry that all these things are going to kind of bite you in the end. So it sounds like more work, and setting up the pipeline might take a little bit of work, but it's like, you invest a little bit of work up front and you just mitigate all these potential problems down the line. So anyway, Joshua, I think, is going to give a live demo of this website that I threw together, and has kindly sponsored, along with Tracktion, the backend servers for this site. So it's called validatemyplugin.com. And Joshua, why don't you give it a whirl and see if a live demo has good luck today?
Yeah. So this is my my big performance, my big moment here. Just sharing the screen here. So this is the website, Validate My Plugin, and it's pretty straightforward. Sudara, can you tell them a little bit about just what the requirements are for this to work properly?
Sure, it's cross-platform, Windows, Mac, or Linux. It's only doing VST3 in audio units. So basically what you want to do is just zip up your component or your VST3 and then just drag it on there. The one thing that it doesn't do is if you need to build your Mac plugin to be a universal binary, it can't just be Apple Silicon. So it can't just be built on your M1, because the runners are kind of old school. So it needs to be universal or x86. So, but yeah, you just zip your plugin file, drop it on there, and let's see if it works.
There we go. So grab my zip, I'm dropping it on the validator now, and dropping it.
Uploads, takes you to what looks like a terminal, which is output, and basically it's sending it over to a runner, which is going to pick up the job. And so if you uploaded a Linux plugin like we did here, then a Linux runner will pick it up and just run PluginVal against it. And this will take 20 seconds. And so we'll fill 20 seconds with, I don't know, dancing around a little bit, or going to get a cup of coffee. And then it'll output a bunch of logs with all the details of the run. And it should tell you overall, did it pass? Did it fail? And if it failed, there's details in the logs for you there. And in the case that there was an issue with validation, then the best thing to do is just go download PluginVal itself and run it locally. Mm-hmm. So in this case, it says success, and the logs are required. They're being downloaded, and there was an error. Logs failed to be parsed. Nice.
Oh, no. Okay.
That's pretty funny. Well, if you scroll down a bit to the FAQ, there's a frequently asked questions at the bottom, and there's a, can I see an example run, the third one from the top?
Yeah.
And go there. So that'll show you what a success case looks like. I'll have to look, I guess, as to why this errored, because we even sound checked it, and apparently it's quite a sophisticated process. And actually, this tool is really well tested. Like, all kinds of zip files can be uploaded, all kinds of plugins, and it does its best, but apparently it's not bulletproof quite yet.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit, you or Dave, can you talk a little bit about exactly what it's doing? Because I think for some people that may be starting out, they may not even be so clear as to what's happening here. Why is this tool so important for plugin developers? Just a very high level overview.
Do you want me to just kind of, I can run through, if you leave this up on screen, I can kind of just run through what it's doing in terms of the test cases. So
yeah, that sounds great.
So the first thing it does is try to scan it, because it has to kind of get a handle to the plugin to be able to run. So that's what that num plugins found output is, and then it will give you the output, the version number of them. Next thing, where there's like dotted lines, that's a different test case. So you can see the whole thing's chunked up into lots of different test cases. Then it tries to open the plugin GUI, and then it closes it and tries to open it again. And if you've got verbose login on, it will tell you how long that took. So you can see if, it's much quicker open it the second time. Then what do? We try and get some plugin information. So it will say, ask your plugin for its name, alternative names. Sometimes you can report shorter names for plugins. If you report any latency, any tail length, whether you support double precision. So you can see how it's just calling all these things that you may not even know are present in your plugin. And if you've half implemented one of these functions or something, then this is going to probably crash at that point. Or at least you can look at the log and say, oh, that's not my plugin name, I should fix that. Then it checks for any kind of built-in programs, and it will, I think, try and change those if you have any. This one doesn't have any though. Then it tries to open the editor in a different case. I think this is where it's already been prepared with sample rate and the block size. Yeah, you can see there's a test that tries to do some processing and opens the editor whilst it's doing that. A bunch of different sample rates and block sizes are used to just run the processing block. There's a few tests that do things like set a new sample rate without calling release resources on the old one, although not in BST 3, because I don't think that's allowed anymore. But these kind of situations that you might not think of when you're building a plugin that hosts can do. Like, I think there's one test for calling process block with 0 samples, especially a number of samples less than were called in prepared to play. And that's something that gets a lot of people who are new to plugin development. They say, well, I was prepared with 512 samples. Why am I now getting called with 64? And the reason for that is because that tends to be how automation works in hosts. But it's these surprises that it can test early on. Then what have we got? We've got a bunch of stuff for changing parameters whilst doing processing. I think this is doing some of the stress testing. So it's changing parameters on a background thread whilst doing processing on a different thread. There's getting buses. There's Auval and BST3 validator runs there, but of course this is a Linux BST3, so that wasn't used, and the validator app isn't bundled at the moment. Some more bus stuff, disabling buses, enabling buses, changing channel layouts, and fuzz testing parameters. So just trying to set them to a bunch of different values. And it does all that in, what, 20 seconds, something like that. So you can see if you make this part of your CI, every time you do a commit, it does all of this kind of seamlessly behind the scenes. That simulates a lot of real world usage from your plugin. So it can really help you get some information about it back quickly.
Fantastic. Yeah, so basically what you're saying there is that a lot of people who are just starting off with plugin development, they're really only thinking about the application side of the development, the actual product itself. And then you have all of these different scenarios that this plugin needs to run in, right? So different DAWs, different operating systems, and so on. And so what PluginVal is doing is it's actually simulating those different scenarios that may happen within the host, different scenarios that the user may do with your plugin that are unexpected, just to make sure that your plugin actually stands up to those different environments. And then if there are problems, then it'll basically kick it back, let you know that hey, your sample rate is 0. It's not supposed to be 0. It's not a valid sample rate. Doesn't have any output channels under this scenario. I don't know, and basically kicks it back to you. So once it passes this, then you can ensure that it's a more robust product that will actually stand up.
So
Yeah.
I think a good way to think about software development is it's releasing stuff is all about confidence. So when you do your first, hello world, or you're getting it and you do your initial commit, your confidence that you can release that is probably very low because there's no testing, no continued work on it or anything. And what you're aiming for is a kind of a level of confidence that means when you release it to people who may or may not pay money for it, they can use it properly. And I think what PluginVal does is it just gives you that increased confidence, so it's being kind of used in at least a number of different ways continuously. One more thing I would say is, apart from doing the kind of stress testing, there are also some performance kind of tests. So it will, on level 10, I think it will do checks for memory allocations in the audio thread, which is a kind of common reason for getting poor performance or occasional poor performance, should I say. So it will also check for those kind of scenarios to kind of catch, I don't know what you call them, faux pas or bad practice.
Yes. And why don't, and for people that are just starting off, why wouldn't you want to do any memory allocations on the audio thread?
Well, I'd probably refer you to a talk me and Fabian gave called Realtime 101 at ADC, because that was like a 2-hour investigation of exactly this kind of thing. But the short reason is that if you do a memory allocation, you have to get a lock on the whole process, because other threads might be trying to get memory or releasing memory, which means that you're effectively waiting for the rest of your system to be free before you get any memory back. And that could be more than a few milliseconds, which is all you have in the audio world.
Right. So when your audio callback function is happening, if you have a function that's calling and you don't know how much time it'll take for that function to return or to finish, then that can cause a break in your audio, which would be bad for your application.
It's also slightly worse than that, because you can end up getting into a situation called priority inversion, where if you have a thread that you're contending with has lower priority and you end up competing for a lock with it, the operating system, depending on how it's set up, can deprioritize whatever your audio thread is calling on to be the priority of the thread that it's contending with. So now your kind of high real-time audio thread has got pushed off because it says you're not playing by the rules, and then you get poor performance even if there are no more allocations. The operating system behavior will vary, but that's kind of theoretically the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and there's a I would call it iconic talk that you and Fabian did at ADC a couple of years ago. What was it called? Realtime. Do you remember the actual Realtime 101? Yeah, and there are actually 2 parts to it. So it's 2-hour talk, and it's with Fabian. Hi, Fabian, if you're watching, and Fabian and Dave, and they cover so many of these various scenarios that can happen, thread switching and more complex cases, and what to do about them. So if you're looking to make a deep dive into the into the world of lock-free systems in C++, that's a great place to get started.
Yeah, I would just also just a small word on that. There is like a 2-part, 2-hour length talk that we did at ADC, but we also did kind of the same material, but without a few extra examples and questions at Meeting C++. So if you've only got sort of 50 minutes, you could watch that version as well to get the kind of the condensed form.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, and one other thing, while we're talking about talks, years ago, when I first released PluginVal, which is probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, I gave a talk at ADC called PluginVal, Why Validate Plugins, which goes into a bunch of these kind of scenarios about different operating systems, different plugin formats, different hosts, and just kind of helps you visualize the landscape and what you're exposed to as to why tools like this are useful.
Fantastic. Okay, we have a number of questions. Some of those you and Sudara have already answered more or less, but maybe you want to expand upon them. One question that I wanted to ask for myself were that you talked about how for Mac that PluginVal can call Auval, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how those two are different, or if they're mostly the same, or if there are any differences between those two.
Yeah, so Auval was actually the inspiration for PluginVal. On the Mac, you have Auval, which does essentially the same things, but it was only available for audio units and only on the Mac. And I wanted to make a tool that you could use VST, VST3 across all different platforms, so we could test our plugins more thoroughly. And then I wanted to go a bit further than what Auval does. So I think Auval will do a lot of the things like calling parameter functions, setting parameters, processing in different chunks and things, but I don't think it does some of the more heavy lifting stuff that PluginVal does, like checking for allocations on the audio thread and bits and pieces like that. So yeah. So for people that may not know, if you have if you're on Mac and you happen to have Logic, when you open up Logic and you have a new plugin, it runs Auval on through all of the plugins to validate those and ensure that they're safe to run within Logic. And you may have had scenarios where when you start it up, it tests out the new plugin that you just got, and it says, hey, validation failed for one reason or another, and it might try to disclude that plugin from your plugin list because it failed the validation. So that's what Auval actually is. For people that don't know, you may have used it and not even realized. So a question for Sudara is from Paul Davis, who asks, is that a Kawai K5000 on the top rack on the left?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's thanks to Cesare, actually. I'm building an additive synth, so I'm very interested in the history of additive synthesizers. And so, yeah, that top one is a Kawai K5000.
Big shout out to Cesare Ferrari, who is now part of the SoundStacks team. So he's doing a lot of great things with Jules over there. Okay, great. And then there's a question which we've mostly already answered. This comes from Tugrul, who asks, I have experienced that sometimes different DAWs behave differently, mostly on program changes or presets. How do you handle the behavior of all DAWs, since there are so many that are on the market? So PluginVal has been really invented for that purpose, to test these different case scenarios. Are there other different things that developers can do to ensure that their plugins are working across the spectrum, or would you say that really it's PluginVal that's the best tool for this? I think, and sorry to interrupt, and I think that this brings up a question that I don't know has been really publicly discussed, and would probably make a great talk for a presentation, which is that different DAWs that developers tend to know what some of the edge case scenarios tend to be for some of the DAWs. Like for instance, with FL Studio, it's known that the buffer sizes change a lot, and that a lot of times those buffer sizes aren't necessarily a power of 2, so they come back with really strange buffer sizes. So if anybody wants to deliver a talk on some of the typical behaviors that you would see in different DAWs and what the differences in edge case scenarios would be, that would make a fantastic talk. Sorry, take it away, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to say quickly is that testing is kind of really your only approach here. Yes, using tools like PluginVal, Auval, the BST3 validator will help you and get you a long way, because they're very low cost in terms of time and effort for a big return. But PluginVal and those tools they're kind of like a brute force approach. So they'll just do lots of stuff lots of times and hope that it will catch stuff. Try and simulate what hosts might do. Whereas if you actually run it in a host, you know that you're getting the behavior that host does. So also having a good QA team, having beta testers, people that are actually using your plugins in a real environment is also pretty essential, because there will be things that aren't covered by the testing tools, the validation tools. And one of the big things is give us feedback for what the DAWs do. If you find a weird thing that a DAW does, like it calls, I don't know, changes your bus layout without calling release resources, or does something in a weird order that you weren't expecting, you can write a test for that in PluginVal. There is a really simple code. It's basically you get a plugin instance and you do some stuff to it, and you have some expect, or it will crash. That's the other thing. So pull requests are really simple to write for that kind of stuff, or you can just say, oh, I was using it in this DAW and I wasn't expecting this, and someone will probably say, yep, that's totally valid behavior for the DAW to do. Add it to PluginVal.
Great.
So if you wanted to kind of comment on that anymore, Sudara?
Yeah, maybe I was just going to say Juice and other frameworks sort of aim to, smooth that experience over and provide a common API. They're all built on top of all these other APIs. And, I think the aim is there. It's just a very complicated territory. But I think there's often people experiencing the same issues that you might be. And so the Juice forum is a good place to always first check to see who else is running into these issues, especially because these are all moving targets. Every DAW is being updated, every operating system is being updated, and the Juice team's working hard on normalizing all that, but rely on people to speak up as well. And it's a fun business.
I do think there was some kind of community effort on the Juice forums once to have a sort of publicly viewable or editable Google Doc that had, lists of odd behavior, so you could go and check it. But I can't remember exactly where or when that was now. If anyone listening knows of it, post it in the chat.
Great.
Or I might have just dreamt it. It's the kind of thing I dream of these days.
Yeah. Once again, if anybody's looking to make a really cool audio programmer meetup talk or ADC talk, talking about edge case scenarios or things to look out for with particular hosts, I'm all ears and I'd love to hear about it. So get in touch. So this is something that you talked about already, Dave. But maybe if you have any more comments on this. So Ismar asks, did you succeed in integrating PluginVal into a TeamCity or Jenkins pipeline? So there are already a number of people who are using this on a daily basis within their CI pipeline. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention about that?
I haven't specifically done it with Jenkins or TeamCity, but I do have it working in Azure pipelines and GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions stuff, you can see how it's being used from the PluginVal repo. And it's literally download it, unzip it, run it. so it should be easily callable from any environment.
Yeah. So there's another question that I think that we've answered, but if either of you want to make a comment about it, it's all good. So this from Vivid Active IT, who asks, why is this a web interface and not a local library? So it was a local library that's been made into a web interface. So maybe Sudara could talk a little bit about the motivation behind making this a web accessible tool.
Yeah. And also follow on from that with the kind of the technologies and the process involved, because I find that quite interesting.
Sure. So yeah, it just came out, it just bubbled out of work of downloading it locally and playing it and playing with it and using it and wanting to put it in CI. You know, there's just friction to getting started with these sorts of things. So I thought naively that it would be pretty easy just to kick this together and get it working. That's why it's a web interface. It's just to sort of let you drag and drop something on, see what it looks like and get your first taste. And, you know, if you decide it's useful, and, you know, downloading an app is also not that tough to do. And then, yeah, there are other ways like CI or use it as a library. But so in a way, it's just a nice sort of gateway drug to getting started with plugin validation, assuming that it works. I'm sorry that it didn't work for the live demo. I feel like I tried it right after and it works fine. So I don't know what the problem was. But yeah, so as far as the stack, I come from a web dev background and like DevOps. And so I was especially overconfident thinking about how easy this would be. And we had just cooked up all these GitHub actions to, you know, run on every platform, run PluginVal on every platform. So I thought, hey, I'll just take the stuff, copy and paste. Let's go. So actually, this web service does use the GitHub API and runs these plugins through GitHub Actions. What happens is that when you upload a zip, it sanity checks it first on the server. It doesn't open up the zip. It just inspects it to make sure there's a plugin inside. And if so, what architecture? I think in the case of Mac, it actually has to verify the architecture by opening it up and then deleting it. And then what happens is it's sent over to, or actually the GitHub runner spins up and asks for it, and via a shared secret, it's sort of sent over. And then basically the GitHub runner runs it, and we're constantly kind of polling and asking for, you know, how far along are you? Do you have the logs yet? And then we eventually dump the logs out. GitHub runner is destroyed, the plugin is then deleted, and the logs remain. And you have the ability to sort of delete these logs. But the tech stack is Ruby on Rails, which I have a lot of experience with, and there's WebSockets involved for all the live polling. And yeah, I think that's it, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds like
I just want to add one more use case for the web front end, which is for end users who aren't developers. So we have a DAW and we have a built-in tool for PluginVal. So you can, it kind of actually it downloads the latest version of PluginVal and will run your validation and give you the log, which we sometimes ask people to do if we get customer support. We say, hey, can you validate it and give us the log? Because it might help us to see what's going on and gives us a good entry point for when we open discussions with plugin developers. We can say, hey, you know, we found this that's happening because some user is trying to get the textual string of this parameter or something and it's crashing. So it's quite helpful for speeding that up. But if you're not using Waveform and you're using some other DAW, users are very used to using websites. So being able to just, you know, validate a plugin by drag and drop and then copy some text into a support ticket is really kind of wonderful.
It's good if you're feeling lazy, you know. Yeah, I use it when I'm feeling lazy. I'm like, I can't even be bothered to open an app, just drag it in there.
Yeah, you would be amazed at how much of a barrier to entry either downloading something is or having to type something out on the terminal. It really is a barrier that's just way beyond most people's energy levels, whereas, you know, drag and drop is something they do thousands of times a day. So it's more likely to happen.
Yeah. Tugril asks if there's a list of tests that are performed.
On PluginVal or the tests that it does?
Yeah, I guess on PluginVal, just the different tests that actually happen through PluginVal. Is there a list of those of what actually tested?
I don't know if there's a flat list. It would be easy to add, but because, or you could just get the repository and do a search for public unit test, because they all inherit from Juice unit tests, so you can see like the title, they're pretty descriptive.
Yeah.
But we could add something to dump that out. Someone added support to specify a list of tests to disable, so those strings don't change.
Mm-hmm. Paul Davis and a few other people have asked if there are any plans to include testing of UI interactions such as resizing.
Everyone always asks this. So resizing is actually something we probably could do. That could work. The question then is resizing along with doing what? We have tests that open the UI whilst it's processing audio and changing parameters and stuff. Would you want to resize whilst it's also doing that, or just just open the UI, resize it? There's a kind of confusing finding out whether a plugin is resizable is also, I think there's two different ways to do it, because BST3 had a different way, but I'm not sure if they now removed that second way or not. So yeah, try it. Just add a test, create a window, resize the window, and see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, which is that these are abstractions around different plugin formats as well, which all have their native methods for calling different things like resizing a plugin. And so I think that it's very easy to possibly overlook the fact of the amount of work that needs to go into a lot of these things, because a lot of times we view BST3 and AU as being just different forms of the same thing, but there are actually very significant differences between those that tools like Juice and PluginVal have actually abstracted out.
I should note that almost all of that effort is Juice's part. They do an incredible job on trying to unify those interfaces and giving you a consistent API to program against. And PluginVal really is just utilizing that. I kind of describe it as a Juice plugin host that doesn't produce any audio or anything. It just hammers your functions of the plugins to give you kind of coverage. So it's really Juice that, as you say, is doing the job of consolidating significantly different plugin APIs that are becoming more different as well. So VST3 is a very different beast to Audio Unit.
Right.
And LV2 has just been added now, which works in a completely different way as well.
Yeah. And now we have Clap as well. So yeah.
Looking forward to the Clap Juice hosting or plugin format, and then we can add it into PluginVal.
Yeah. And if you're looking for it's a few years old now, but if you're looking to make a deep dive into the differences between those APIs, there's a great talk a few years ago from Fabian Rengiles talking about plugin APIs and the differences between them. So very fascinating talk if you want to get under the hood of what Juice is actually doing and abstracting out for you, and talk about those differences. So
that's actually a really good talk as well. If you're just doing any kind of library design, because it goes over the choices that the people made when designing those libraries. It's a good one.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to interject one thing, which is my favorite thing about running PluginVal locally is that it automates your UI and you get to see it go crazy. And like, I've got lots of colored bars, and it's just like they're, because it's automating it as fast as it can. And it's just, it's like a little fireworks show. I recommend it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I guess it does that, which most DAWs, I know we do when we do an offline render. So as fast as the processor can handle, we close all the UIs before we do that, probably because of that reason. But yeah, PluginVal actually keeps the UI open to test that case. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that's something that breaks. And sorry, just to follow on from the original question, which was about testing UIs. This was traditionally really hard with Juice, because what people really want to do is say, oh, I've got my UI, is this button in this position, or can I click it? Is it visible? And there are all kind of strategies for like creating a bitmap and then comparing it using image comparisons. That doesn't really work a lot if you've got parameters that might move around or animations and things. But Juice has since added accessibility support, which gives you a really good handle into the position and representation, labeling of things. So there might be some interesting ways you can kind of delve into that aspect of things.
Fantastic. We have one more final question before we move on, which is actually a little bit of a question that's a little bit not quite as relevant to PluginVal specifically, but I think it'd be something that you probably have some good advice on. And this comes from Manuel Jerome, who asks, how do you get noticed by prospective employers while contributing to open source projects? And this could be something that may be more of a Sudara question, because he has some great. I see a face of surprise from Sudara.
Yeah, no, I like this topic because like I've contributed to open source for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And honestly, it's the thing that gets me jobs when I want them, when I'm not trying to build a business. But I think, the audio community is pretty small. So if and the number of open source projects is also, there's a lot, there's a couple hundred. Actually, I have a list called Awesome Juice. If you Google Awesome Juice, it's a list of all the Juice open source projects. And I think contributing to any of them, if you start to build some momentum and contribute a few things here and there, I think that's really valuable. And if you bring it up in an interview or even before the stage informally, I think that's enough. Just pointing to, the fact that you committed to a particular project, I think it shows a lot more than competence. There's like initiative, and there's also like a values, that you value this thing. So I think it's really, I would vote for it as one of the best things you could do if you're looking to sort of break into the industry.
Yeah. And just to add to that, in terms of it's a lot closer to working with a real team contributing to an open source project than working on your own kind of private code and then showing that to a prospective employee, because you probably have to do things like initial discussion, there's code reviews, there's pull requests, there's CI to pass. So it kind of really shows that you understand that process. And it's obviously just a really good way to say, hey, here's some code that I did that was deemed good enough to be accepted into this project. And yeah, it gives you prospective employers a good way to look at what you've actually done.
Right. You bring up a fantastic point, which is that there is a world of difference between creating a product in Juice that works on your computer and you've done on your own, and it works in your DAW and it works just fine, versus working with a team that has a CI pipeline with running PluginVal, where you have to coordinate with teams, handle pull requests, dialogue, where you may be only working on a very small portion of a particular product. So, when you're working with a team on a DAW, for instance, it's not like the whole team just has at it on the entire DAW. You may be working on one specific feature of that product, a very small window of that product, and being able to coordinate with the wider team about what features are going to be integrated, what the priorities are, working through Jira backlogs and so on, shows a world of experience. And one final thing that I'll say on that is, as a person who runs a recruitment and contracting company, is that we get so many CVs from people, and a lot of times, well, one of the first questions that we ask people is, well, what have you built, right? So I always say to people, if you were a painter or if you were a singer, one of the first questions that a person on the street may ask you is, well, show me something that you've painted, show me a song that you've sung on, right? Because they want to see what you've done. And it's no different for audio software development. If a person says, hey, I'm an audio software developer, the first question that somebody may ask is, well, what have you worked on, right? What are projects that you've contributed to? What are products that you've made? And probably one of the most significant things that you can show is that you've been contributing to an open source project that is with a team that has that full pipeline, because that's the closest thing that you're going to get to a simulation of what it's working like in an actual company. So, and like Sudara said, there are several fantastic projects. This is one of them. If you want to work on synthesizers, there's the Surge synthesizer project run by Bacon Paul, which is a fantastic, fully featured open source synthesizer built with Juice. And there are a couple other fantastic ones. And there's a full list that Sudara has created on awesomejuice.com. I've put the URL in the chat description for anybody that wants to go and check it out. Fantastic. Cool. So I think that that wraps that up. Thank you very much, Dave and Sudara. Okay.
You're welcome.
Great. And now, before I pass things on to Rachel for our second exciting talk of the evening, just want to remind you about our audio programming community. So we have a really vibrant audio programming community that consists of audio developers of all different experience levels and backgrounds. Come join us and talk audio dev stuff with us. You can find out more about that on the audioprogrammer.com/community. And with that, I will pass things over to Rachel to introduce our second talk.
Cool. Thank you, Josh. And thanks to Dave and Sudara for that really interesting talk and demonstration. People were really engaged in the live chat for that one. So it's really excellent. So in our second segment tonight, we're going to be speaking to Natalia Guerra. Natalia is the co-founder of the first UI design studio for audio interfaces named Voger Design. It was founded around 10 years ago. And more recently, she founded UI Mother, a UI kit online store for audio software. So between these two businesses, Natalia has been involved in delivering over 250 high-quality, innovative UIs for the audio software market. So we're really fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from Natalia today. We're going to be having an open discussion surrounding selecting a proper designer for a project. So before we open up the discussion, we'd love to hear a bit more about your journey and background and what sort of led you to a career in audio interface design.
Oh, Rachel, thank you for such an intro. I've never been given such a cool intro before. Since Joshua mentioned search, actually, I wanted to just say that we also contribute to the search UI design. It's an open source synthesizer. And actually, our journey began with the freelance work, with the non-paid work. So we just contributed to the skins for the Reaper, the software, the DAW. So it's been our introduction to the audio industry, to the UI industry. We just decided that it's cool to make things better, not perfect, but better. And that's how it started. So yeah, it's basically was the beginning of Voger as a UI design studio. So we made things for free for 2 years. And then we got some first commission work, so it went very well. Okay, so I wanted to bring this topic about the UI designer, the proper UI designer, just because I know that many of the developing developers sometimes struggle with that, especially with finding the right one. Just because, you know, we all do kind of we start this journey with finding the designers like with the pitfalls, and I don't want that. Just because I've been through this for this 10 years, I'm finding the proper designer, I'm evaluating him, and I'm assigning him to the proper task. And that's you know, let's start with this idea that well, we want to know why we are doing the project. So the project actually consists of the client itself, the designer, and the marketing part of the product itself. So let's think about those three aspects in terms of this. First, I want to ask you how you, well, the guys here, how you work, how you find a designer for, you know, not only the UI design, but for any like a logo or a website design, or probably like an interior design. How do you find it? And I'll add it. I'll add my info and my experience to that.
I would say that I would look for an example of previous work of this designer. I don't have a plugin, unfortunately, that I've had to pursue a designer for. So maybe some other people here might have some more experience, particularly with audio interface design, with looking for a designer. So I'll open that question up to the floor. If anyone,
I'll go.
Okay.
So yeah, this is highly pertinent to the journey I'm on, since I'm building a product and a marketing webpage, and there's all these logos and everything. So yeah, I think budget is a concern when, especially for people getting started. I have a longtime friend that I rely on, and I'm kind of picky about usability, and he knows my, you know, the things I like and don't like, but I actually end up having to take his work and sort of do the last mile myself. So I'm very sort of hands-on in determining what we can do, and knowing, I don't know, for me it ends up being I end up being more involved than I want to be, just because yeah, I don't have access to a lot of resources or a lot of people. Like, I would love to know what you're going to say, because I actually do. I need help on marketing page. You know, my designer friends employ it. So where do I find someone? Please let me know.
Okay. David, maybe you want to add up something?
Our experiences are kind of mixed, really. And I guess a few different things. Traditionally, or for some of our earlier projects, they've been friends that people have worked with in the past, maybe in different industries, that have said, yeah, we can, you know, do something for some of your products. And that can often lead to slightly different looking user interfaces. Like, we have a product called Biotech that's quite sort of has an artistic central theme, because the designer was a more kind of artistic designer on that. But we have other products that are very much more functionality based, or more functional based. So they're very different use cases. And we've also used online kind of a service. There's a service called 99 Designs, which we've used for logos in the past, because for something like a logo where you don't necessarily know what you want, you can kind of throw it out there and people can very quickly do a mock-up, and then you can go, oh, I hadn't thought of that idea. That's a good thing to kind of go with. So I guess different channels depending on the use case. But I would say that finding a designer that you work well with and that understands your users and also the features and stuff that you're doing, like what you need to get across, really helps engineering. If you can get a good design that you know is just going to fit at different screen resolutions and different sizes, and it just makes implementing that stuff really, really easy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I noticed that you've mentioned you have to know, you've got to know what you want. Well, yes, this is exactly where it basically should start. When I'm searching for a designer for let's say for an interior, right? I start to think what I want, right? Or I'm looking for a UI designer to get my new UI kit, right? So I start to think what I want, right? Because I'm the part of the process, of the big process of creating a user interface, right? So this is a really complex process. Actually, it involves, like I mentioned, the client, basically you or me, the UI designer, and the user, well, the marketing part of the product. So if I can answer the first question, like why and what do I want? So, for example, I want this kind of style. Why do I want this kind of style? Because, for example, I want successful launch, I want sales, I want to be satisfied as a creator. I want to bring an idea to the table to this project, or I want to, probably I want to have more time on marketing and let the designers do the work. So this is the very important step, to put this idea somehow in your specification or just in your like notes that okay, I'm doing this because I want to do like sales, or I want to be a creator, I want to take part, or I don't want to take part. This is important because it will influence what kind of designer you would probably want to have on this project for you or for your team. So let's move to the, Rachel brought it to the portfolio. So I would like look at the portfolio or go to 99 Design and look at the specific type of portfolio or specific reference or specific image. Here's a funny note, even a story. I'm going to tell you a story that's a hilarious one. So once I hired a designer to make a UI kit. I gave him a test task, a small task. He just nailed it. It was a task like do a simple UI design of one knob in Figma using this kind of reference style. So he nailed it. And then here comes the real task, the UI kit with the real with the real typefaces, all this kind of stuff, the graphics references. And I see that he's performing worse than on a test task, And when we were digging up this kind of problem, we realized that he just stole someone's graphics for a test task to pass on the project, and he just failed on the simple typeface choice in the real work. So what I'm saying is that sometimes its portfolio is misleading, and what you have to look for in portfolio is the worst item in portfolio. So like if you see the worst item in portfolio, that's an average performance within the period. So like if he posted it a few years ago, it was the average outcome for the period. Well, that's a trick. I always look for the worst looking item, and I'm asking, how was it done? How did you do it? what do you think about it? Whether you consider it's good or bad? Well, it's not good to say it just because it's it would lead him into some other kind of discussion. But how did you do it? Basically, what obstacles did you have on that? So it would give you like an experience of what was in his head, what was the process of getting there. So yeah, we covered the follow topic. It's because sometimes we're looking at an extremely important thing when you're looking for a designer and you already established your vision, at least a little bit of vision in your head. You have to search for a designer that has already done something similar or is capable of doing at least some part of this work, because you cannot find a designer that haven't done anything like you want and expect a really good result from it. That's actually, unfortunately, that tend to lead us to problems, to unfinished UI kits. Funny thing about UI kits that we're doing, it's basically like a test platform for UI designers that, if they don't pass their kits work, they won't pass for the real UI work. So probably you might use this experience, like having some test task and see how how does the designer do this work? If you, of course, if you have an ability to or a possibility to test it, but actually that's a test platform for me to really find a designer that I can assign to a project, because I know what his performance is. And here comes the most important thing that I wanted to bring to this table tonight. The design itself. Well, the designer, the profile of design, and not the profile like a personality or the profile of what his portfolio looks like, but it's more like a soft skill. It's more like what he looks like in terms of job, in terms of whether he is a chaotic creator or he is a technical guy, or he's I call them the optimizers. So I have this types of designers. So when I do the UI test work, I try to understand whether the person is a chaotic creator. So whether he is good at creating like something that haven't and unseen, so something new. So he's not just copying parts and pieces of from everywhere into something new, but he could create an idea with some knowledge from other industries or something like that. So this is the first and extremely rare type of designers, and extremely hard to work with within a team, because they are chaotic. And once you want them to do a specific, iteration to the UI design, they would like to bring up something new. They don't tend to do exactly what they're told to do. But it's really cool to work with them on something like a creative idea. So the next type of the designer, that is, I don't want you to completely rely on these grades, but they are extremely helpful just to to a little bit measure and do not trust it too much. So the technical type of design, basically those kind of designers are, they love to copy, improve a little bit. They are more into technologies. They are more into knowing super, all this kind of automations, all this kind of features in the software. They are more on the technical side of the design. They're more UX designers. So they're more like really good in terms of delivery, in terms of what features are implemented in what way. So, and this kind of designers, they are really resilient. They're really good at doing exactly what they are told to do. And another type of designers, they are optimizers. They are a bit of both. And those are like majority of the designers, because they have a little bit of this and those. So I've told you this kind of grades that I've established through years. And the funny thing is that we don't realize that we, as the product owners, like, for example, when you're developing a product, you also tend to act like one of kind of the designers on your project. And if there are different matches between the type of owner of the product, whether he's a creator or he is a technical guy or he's an optimizer, and the same with the designer. So I realized that the best matches when the client or product owner is a technical guy and he works with a creator, and they have this perfect match, and vice versa when the creator with a technical guy. And it's really bad when the UI designer and the client are creators. So there's like 20% of such combinations. I've made my own research within all those projects, and I realized that the most hard to perform projects were when I assigned the wrong designer, the creative, to the client. So we as creators typically want to be like more picky, like we want to control things, we want to our vision to be implemented in our design. We have a designer creator, and it's going to be like, most of the fails that I've stumbled upon was where I assigned the wrong designer to the client. So basically they are not good match. So about this match, actually, I realized that most of software developers, they are also users of this software. So they also so they can relate to the audience they are developing the plugins to. But sometimes they can just find the perfect match for the design, and maybe this information just a little bit, be a glimpse for you that probably if you have problems with the designer, maybe it just weren't that kind of design for you. Especially if you're working on a budget, it's crucial to have a proper interview to realize how the designer do, how he thinks, and probably if he's too much just like you, there's a red flag for that. Because it's also hard to say that technical designers are really good match to the technical developers, just because they could dive into features and just forget about the user at some point. So basically my role in Voger is just to see, to understand from the very first meeting with the client or with the developer, the decision maker, who is he, whether he is a creator or he is a technical guy or he is an optimizer. Basically, an optimizer in business world is a businessman, so he basically just don't want to get involved into your design and just rely on the professionals. And I'm just trying to choose the proper design to the project. Basically, that's the trick I tend to do all these 10 years.
Could I? Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Rachel, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to jump in and ask a question from the customer's perspective. Mm-hmm. So we spoke a bit about having a vision for your product. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, at what stage in the process of developing audio software would you suggest that companies or independent developers should approach a UI design studio or designer if that's a service that they're interested in using? And on top of that, what is some useful information that the customer can have ready when they're approaching that design studio to best help the designer help them?
I still believe that the best scenario where he can start with the vision, where he already has an idea of the product and he just implements it with at least a sketch or a rough idea, the first idea. Because what we as clients have, we don't have this muscle very strong, this prediction muscle. Why I'm saying this prediction muscle is just, it's the vision and the end result are, have this gap of time and gap of a lot of people and a lot of process that prevents us to, and this vision in your head, it's vague. It's really hard to get a grasp of it and transfer it to another person without all those distortion in understanding. I'm just giving you a simple example. Name me any user interface that you consider to be modern. Just one that you consider to be modern. So go ahead, name one.
I think probably Pigments by Arturia. That's a pretty modern interface.
Okay. Pigments. Okay. Name, guys, go on. Just name a few more. I need just to show you this thing.
So I guess there's a few that sort of spring to mind. Like Logic Pro did a redesign probably quite a long time ago now, but that was a big kind of paradigm shift. Bitwig is another one that sort of came on with what I would call a modern looking UI. And then NI's Massive 10 was a kind of big shift from the previous Massive that I think tried to refocus the design theory.
So, yeah, the point is, I got the point. So the point is that I brought just one word, modern, right? And if we put all those user interfaces in a line, they would be completely different, not only in terms of the average color scheme, but in terms of the usage of the key elements that creates the style. So I bet they are different in terms of how you perceive the word modern. So this is the problem that many of us struggles when they are prototyping the product. So when they are trying to deliver the vision into the real picture, which is why it's important to and just rare developers do this when they try to find this vision before they dive into the real development, not the real development. I bet that most of you, when you're developing some features, you already have something that you worked on. So it's basically, you already have something to work with. But when you have it like in front of your eyes, it's easier to work with it because you've got it laid out, you've got it designed just even in a rough sketch. Sorry, I forgot the second question because I got too far into all those examples and stuff. So
no worries, that was a great answer. So the second question was just about what sort of information it's useful to have ready for the designer. For example, I saw you did a great short talk on Voger Design YouTube about designing UIs, and you were talking about the importance of the feel of interface versus the look. So if a customer can communicate what they want the feel of their product to be, is that something that's really useful for a designer to work with? Or is there anything else that you can think of that's just really great to have ready to show or tell a designer when you approach them?
Yeah, not only that, but sometimes it's really good to have like visual references from what you consider to be moody or positive. So you have to deliver this idea with any means that are available to you. So if you're a movie lover, you just given the references of the movie poster, of the movie color scheme, whatever you think that is right for you. Because sometimes when we're having this discussion, when the client gives us the references, it's really good to have this discussion, because you definitely sometimes don't see that you have like how to say it, contradictions. I'd say it contradictions, because for example, I've seen this. I wouldn't name the product, but for example, the look and feel of the product should have been like a futuristic, sci-fi, neon, something like that. And the product was like okay, let's call it just an instrument, not hardware. I just don't want to spoil the thing. So let's call it an instrument that is played in huge holes, and it's wooden. And most of the competitors have done it in wood, and it's worked really well. And the concept was to do something different from what is on the market. But it appeared to be that this idea were too far from what the users would experience as, yeah, I understand what it is. Yeah, it looks okay to me. Yeah, it feels right. So like by doing those sketches before, you've spent a lot of money into designing the whole thing, but you've got the first sketch and you can talk to a couple of guys, a couple of developers, and you know how to make good questions that would answer. So it's not like sharing opinions, it's just like whether, sorry guys, whether it's like it has that feeling, or whether it seems like this kind of product or something like that, then it would save you a lot of time and money and nerves, especially, and motivation, right, to go on to do this.
Cool. I had a question. So one of the things that we do at the Audio Programmer is we have a plugin agency where we build plugins for clients, and the approach that we've taken up till now that seems to work the best is that we really just focus on what we want the instrument or the effect to do, and we just have a generic UI layout that we send to the client to test out, and we make sure that everything is pretty much set in stone before we even think about speaking to a designer. And that way, because as you know better than myself, just to add a button or take away a button could completely change the entire design. So the approach that we've taken is that everything has to work exactly as the client wants before we actually even bring in the designer to discuss it. And then once we have the designer, we can just say, here is a list of the parameters. Here's a list. Here is here's a vision board for what the client is looking to do. Do you find that's an effective approach for you, or do you prefer to be involved earlier in the in the creation of this product, or what do you prefer there? And also, I guess another question that leads to other questions is that do you find that most people approach you at the beginning, or do they approach you when they say, I have a plugin, it works the way that I want it, but now I just need the design of it? Or do you find that people involve you from the beginning in that creative process?
Well, answering from the from the last question, there are all kinds of situations actually, and the last one is the least occurring in our work. Regarding the approach that you've described, it's really good approach for the type of the client that is a businessman, that is the optimizer that I call them, because the previous approach that I explained, it was more for technical developers, technical designers, and I know that many of the creative kind of clients, they also tend to have at least a poster or at least something done for the product just to get that feel, just to, to have it there to continue working with that feeling in front of his eyes. It's what we've done with our audio project. We also have different kinds of projects, and you still have to, or at least a mood board that you're having in front of your eyes, and you're working with that kind of feeling. Because I really like cinematography. I really like the movies. They are really good reference because creating a movie is a really complex project, and we just steal some ideas and processes from there. So if you're working for an investor, right, for a customer, in this case, it's more important for them to have like a features like they are lowering the risks of something that cannot be done, and money are not wasted on like features that are not there or are hard to implement or too too costly to implement. So the design comes like on a second, like a supportive thing. But in the end, the marketing creatives or the look and feel of the marketing campaign would also be important in this case. And there, where design also has to take a lead, because the funny thing is, I've been looking at, I've have this huge shift to this kind of second type of approach recently, and I really like it because it's more. It also lowers the risk for the not that kind of design or really, all these unnecessary iterations on the design as well. So it's really good for a business, and sometimes it's really good for the user because they've got an established really good UX and a UI design that's implemented to that really good UX. So it's also a win-win for the user. But when you're working with some startups or some innovative products, then probably the concept or the mood board there has to be a little bit upfront from the UX before the UX takes place. Just because you would definitely work with investors or with the beta testers or with the or with the user or with users that you want to interview them to get the idea of how do you want the product to be done, etc. What features do you want to implement, and when you're showing them at least the mood board, you get the idea whether there is a match between the type of the user and the type of the product. So because we from the cinematography, from the movies, we know that there are different types of personalities, and we do have these personalities. We do have this among those users. You would definitely can define a guy who plays rock from the guy who probably listens to the vaporwave, or they are completely different users, and there are different users, different kind of producers, and they're different archetypes, and they like different styles and user interfaces. So yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Actually, I've got two questions, but they're very different, so it's probably best to say them one after the other. You've talked a lot about how to communicate with a designer, or perhaps find, well, and before that, find a designer who is suitable for your project. But could you perhaps give some advice of where people can go to find people to even start that conversation? So obviously you run a consulting services, Voger. Is there a like a list of resources? Obviously everyone should go to you first and find out the see how things work. But is there a place where people go to just get a bunch of different studios or designers?
That's a really good question, because typically an HR, human resources, do this kind of intro conversation, and but I haven't seen a resource that can evaluate the graphic designers in terms of their skills, how they work. Which is why I realized that there is a test task for that. But I would be really happy to give you a comment on this kind of designer if you have like questions, how he performs or something. So just give me a note somewhere in social media, and I'll help you.
I'm more thinking the scenario that perhaps I'm a freelance plugin developer or an indie developer. I'm working on a project, and I think, right, I've got my synth or my plugin to a certain level, but I really want some professional design work to get the polish finish that I want. Where do I start that search to find someone? Do I just type into Google plugin UI design and you'll probably pop up there, and some others? Is it that straightforward, or is there a good resource that lists a bunch
I have a list of competitors.
Yeah, okay. You're probably the wrong person to ask this, because obviously
no, actually I have the list of competitors. I can share it. I've been researching all this time, and I know who my competitors are, what are their strengths and weaknesses. So you can search the designer. So definitely you have only one tool how to evaluate the design according to a portfolio. So you go to either Behance or like 99 Designs or etc., and you just look at the picture that you think that it's quite okay. At least the style or the technology used behind it is okay for your project. But then you definitely have to work on some test task in order to understand what his workflow is. So you definitely have to make at least an interview on how he works, what are his processes, what his past experience were in this kind of situation, in bad situations, in good situations. How did he work on that? The test task is the only thing that shows you the strengths and weaknesses, because eventually you would work with the strengths, trying to avoid the weaknesses of the designer, which is why I have like a lot of designers in my team, because everyone has its weaknesses, and you have to work with the strengths. You can just cover the weaknesses with the strengths of others of this designer. So I'd recommend you creating a test task that is pretty much close to what he would be doing for a project or for a team, before diving into the real project with a designer. Because every time I try to work with the freelance designers for a commercial project like Straightforward, even with a really nice portfolio, I had to use a backup designers from my team and just switch to my regular pipeline, because it didn't go that well for the client, for the project. So I just dropped this idea many years ago and never came back to it again. Because in our audio user interface industry, there are standards that other industries don't know. There are things that I tried to hire NA players from different companies. So they were elite designers in other companies, and they failed at basic tasks in our audio user interfaces, just because they might be really good designers in their industry, but they are not as good for our industry, because you definitely need to have this kind of set of work experience, and we call it the I don't know the term for it in English, but we call it like насмотренность. It means, sorry for this word, it means that how many user interfaces or reference have you seen and analyzed as good examples and as a bad examples. So you have this like reference base in your head. You have this kind of artistic vision and a vision of possibilities that you would like to try. So you would definitely work with this base in your head, like you're not like with the tools that you know, because an artist, a really cool developer, a really cool designer, he's definitely worked with the hardware tools or software tools, and his base of ideas that he's work gathering. And in audio industry, it's important to see whether it's a proper idea or not before you do a lot of tests and fails. So yeah, so I've had quite a few inquiries where we finished the work after designers that they just didn't get the point of this audio industry. They just couldn't finish the work. They couldn't do the simplest thing that here we are doing on the regular basis, and it was extremely hard for them just because they were doing some posters or website work, and it's hard to switch to audio industry and understand that, for example, the basic scale should go from minus 135 degrees to plus 135 degrees. Like it's a regular thing for us, right? But for the website designing, it's a hard thing to do, hard thing to to switch to this kind of reference base, I'd say. So yeah, the advice is if you are ready to guide the designer, to work with him tightly because you like him as a person, or he is good for you in terms of soft skills. You can gather and work with these hard skills on the go in work, but you just have to choose the person that delivers to you, that is reliable and suits you in terms of he understands your vocabulary, your modern, your like moody, your like positive words. So if you have this really good conversation, really good vocabulary established, if he's really good in terms of soft skills, he's delivering, he's okay for you in terms of budget, then you can put some time into this relationship with any freelance designer. Yeah. I'm not promoting my services, I'm promoting other freelancers right now. But yeah, so everything can be taught. What I've learned from, if the designer doesn't like what he does, he eventually would abandon his work. He wouldn't be really helpful because he would try not to do this because it's too hard, etc. So probably it's really good to work with a friend of yours that's passionate about audio plugins. He's really poor at graphic design, but he would go there with the right references, with the right time. Well, yeah. Or you just can go and buy your kit. Sorry, guys, I couldn't stop it from saying sorry. Well, it's a joke. You don't have to do that.
What we've done as an agency is we typically have 2 or 3 UI designers, because a lot of times when a client comes to us, if we give them a list of a couple different design studios, they'll be able to look through a list. Typically the starting point is they'll look through the portfolio of stuff that's been designed, and they'll look and they'll say, I want something that's kind of like that. And the thing that happens to be closest to that seems to be the starting point for us. So, but yeah, normally it'll either be that, or it'll be, sometimes it may be just a discussion just with a couple designers where we just say, well, look, this is what the client has. It's the same questions that you were talking about, just asking things like, have you ever designed anything like that? You know, what would your approach be to this? Sometimes it might be putting together a quick wireframe just to see what they have in mind. But yeah, that leads me a little bit into a question that I wanted to ask you about when it comes to any creative pursuit, which is about a general being a general service that's able to provide for any type of plugin UI design versus having a specific personality for your design and a specific identity. Do you find, where do you stand when it comes to that? Do you find that you tend to want to be more of a design studio that says, if you're into plugins or if you're into audio software, you can come to us. We can design it to your spec. We can design it any way that you want. Or do you find that you want to go more towards, we have a specific identity? If you look at the products that we've designed, that we've done UI designs before, you can see that there's kind of a common thread, or there's a common there are common fundamentals that we adhere to, and that is us. And if you don't want to adhere to those fundamentals, then maybe we're not the right design studio for you. Where do you find that you are on that spectrum? Do you find that you're more towards the opinionated side, or more towards the whatever you want, we can do it for you?
Recently I'm answering this question with a little bit, prelude, because recently I've done the rebranding, and I've chosen this motto for us as a creative partner. What it means is the creative part stands for innovations, the creativity, all this kind of stuff. And the partner stands for stability, reliability, delivery. Which leads to those two kinds of types of designers that if you need a creative idea, we can have like a creative designer, chaotic, all those kind of stuff designer for you. But eventually all this chaotic creative thing has to be delivered. And here comes other types of designers that would deliver it to you. So I've been trying to eliminate those pitfalls of working with a freelance designer, with one designer, because I've worked with my husband from the very beginning of Voger. We've just started, the two of us. He is a creative type of designer. I'm more like this kind of a bit of those two. So I realized that it's extremely hard to work with one designer because you have to work with his weaknesses. So I tried to eliminate the weaknesses by putting more people into process, but an optimizer to balance out all those things for the delivery. So, I try to say is that I tend to look at my stats, like, the unfinished projects or abandoned or failed projects, and those were for the last 10 years, the 4. So, and I'm sorry for all those 4 projects, because basically it was like where I failed to identify the designer and the right designer and the right process for the type of the developer and the client. And it's been like 300 user interfaces, right? Around 320 at the moment. So I think that a really good statistics comparing to what a freelance designer would have in his career. So I do believe that when you are working, I do believe that we are entering the era when you're working with a complex projects, you would have to rely both on small companies filling out those processes for you, but you need to have a visionary. Basically, it has to be you as a company owner or a marketing guy, or or for example, you're a product manager. So you have to have this vision. So you have to have this role of the visionary, basically, and just like an optimizer for the company. So you have to choose people, and it's up to you whether you want to work with a creative freelancer with his weaknesses, or whether you want with a team who would work out things for you, who would try to to balance, because it's hard to work with the creative people. They are extremely creative, and there's a part of ego here. There's a part of there's a lot of things there, and which is why I realized that okay, I'm going this way. I'm just I'm competing with the freelancers. Okay, they have their strengths. They sometimes better in this particular types of processes or projects. Okay, let it be there. I'm going to be a creative partner, so I'm going to deliver. Well,
yeah, that sounds great. We have quite a few questions from our audience, and maybe I could just fire through those quickly. Kostas asks, are there any resources or examples showing what the typical assets are needed to put together a UI kit? So that sounds a little bit like some of the things that you're doing with UI Mother. Is that right?
Yeah, I do have this list. It can be shared. Well, you just put some email and I'll send it to you.
Okay. And what's your email, or where can they go to
well, it can be found, it's like support this thing at uimother.com. So support at uimother.com.
At uimother.com.
Yep.
Okay, great. Tigral asks, there used to be a lot more bitmap GUIs, and now vector graphics seem more fashionable. Am I wrong in my thinking?
Yeah. Well, I believe it's the tendency to, well, the market is growing and it's changing, and it's influenced by the technologies and by the trends. So now we have cheaper technologies like Figma, and it's easier to work just to design the UI design that would be implemented within a code, just like straight from Figma. And there are trends that have been pushed or just developed through time, not only in audio industry but in global industry. And I'm thinking that it's trend for cheapening, making the UI production, well, the plugin production cheaper, and eventually it influences into more flat, this kind of graphics. Well, I might be wrong, but what I'm seeing is that it really is a trend to less bitmap graphics, less all this type of super creative or super like realistic skeuomorphic things. At the same time, you can be super creative and you can add a lot of details to the UI and make it expensive looking, even if you're working with a 2D or this flat type of graphics. So yeah, I do see this trend as well. And I can't say that I like it, it's just there, but I really miss some, yeah, I miss those kind of super graphic, realistic user interfaces, but it is really good that there are a variety of those, and you can treat different styles, different types of graphics as an instrument to deliver a particular idea. For example, you don't have to make super realistic bitmap user interface for like a simple plugin that just measures, well, do some measurements. You don't have to make it too obvious, to like super kind of stylish, something like that. So it's okay to work with different styles. Style is a tool to deliver an idea and a feeling. So
great. Togrul asks a bit of a futuristic question, but what do you think about UI plugin designs for virtual reality in the future? Do you have any work that goes more into the 3D space, into augmented reality and that side of things?
That's a really good question. I would love to make my hands into that. And that's really interesting to kind of test new environments. Although I don't see too much users, so it's hard for me, to just to see this. I'm not a user of any metaverse, for example, myself yet. So I think that once some of us would be involved in any kind of that activity, we would definitely make that test there. But I don't see too much difference in terms of creating a user interface for there, because all the user interfaces, they have, like even a game user interfaces, they have some rules. And once you've established like a pipeline in one industry, you can, with some pitfalls and changes, you can just dive into that. So whether the guy was asking if it's okay to test and try, yeah, and I would give it, and I would even give him an advice to try to do that, like for free, because we've started when the UI design were not that kind of industry, and it's really good for us because now I can call myself a first UI design studio, because when I started, there were only freelancers. There were no studios at the time. So it's an opportunity, guys. Just grab it.
Yeah.
While I haven't get my hands to that.
That sounds like a great theme for the for this meetup, which is that the opportunities out there, you just have to go find. Speaking of which, there's a great question relating on that from Niles who asks, hello, I'm a designer / front-end web developer, and my dream job would be designing UI for musical applications and hardware. Do you have any advice for finding projects to work as a UI designer?
Well, start with anything open source and free, just because without a portfolio, it would be really hard to find a job. But it's possible. So it's possible. Well, just when I started, I sent 200 cold emails to different companies with a plain PDF kind of portfolio with my services. So it worked for me. And well, you don't have to start with something. So if it's your dream, you just have to do the portfolio and do the research and find a couple of companies that you would like to try. But you do need to have a portfolio for that. So try with the open source and just one example that also could work. One of my clients just showed me an example that he just found a UI design of an existing product. It was probably an equalizer, something like that, and he just used that work. He licensed that work for his plugin, for his free plugin, so it also works. So you can work with then ideas like a set of plugins that you would like to have, and it's really good for having the idea implemented and showing that you can create an ideas, not only implement the ideas of the clients, but you can also generate the ideas. It's really cool. So yeah, that's also a good start.
Right. Alexander Rachov asks, how would you handle a product with existing design where all of the drawing is in code with no use of images? Do you handle that differently than you do with code that uses images?
If I'm were to redesign the plugin, I would use the code as limitation. So what I would use Figma or any flat kind of graphics, and I would so I would definitely use 2D tools and do my pipeline. So do the mood board, the research, the UX, because definitely things would change, or something needs changes, or something improvements can be made. And it's really good to have a little bit of improvements for the end user, because it's good from marketing point. You can make a message, guys, we'll improve the UX and bring up some UI updates, and it's okay. So yep, I would definitely do my pipeline, but the limitations, the client's limitations would be 2D design for me.
Yeah,
I wouldn't stick to 3D design unless it would serve the really good purpose, like for impacting the particular audience. So, or delivering something really important. So, because it's hard to, I bet it's a really big deal to switch from design with a code to all this mapping, all those graphics, all those assets. That's two different things in terms of both delivery and the time. So I wouldn't do that for the clients.
And we have a question from Daniel who asks, what are your thoughts on design competition platforms? So they have these, I think they have these design competition platforms, or where you can submit a spec and then different designers probably submit their proposal for a design or a prototype on spec.
I've never been to such type of platforms. I can't say that they don't work. Probably you can find some guy there. So sorry, I just can't give you a really good advice, because I'm not into this. I don't know how this works. Sorry.
Well, I'm conscious of everybody else's time, so I think we're out of questions, but I'm going to ask one more quick question that I wanted to know about, because one of the things that you had spoken so much about was about communication, and that sometimes you have a client that has one personality and a designer who tends towards a different type of personality. So with the work that you do you facilitate those conversations, or is there a person in the middle that actually helps mitigate those differences and abstracts that out? Because I find that for ourselves, that as an agency, that's probably one of our main benefits, is that we're able to take specific personalities and abstract those out and say, okay, and same thing from the client side, because each client has their own way of relaying information to you, right? And then how does that information translate to what the developers need to do, and how do you sift out the information that maybe is irrelevant or doesn't really work, and just basically sift all that information out, and then what the developers have are just the information on what the direction that we need to go, and then vice versa, right? When the developer has something and they're telling you something that's maybe specific to the code, how do you translate that into something that the client can understand and that's important to the client? And do you find that you're serving that's your main role as the founder? Is that what you do, or is that what somebody does? Or do you find that you really just, or do you find that you connect once you've done that, do you just connect the designer directly with the client and just let them dialogue it out and then check in with them every now and then? Or how does that work on your side?
There's so many questions, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna answer you with this example that every designer that I hired mentioned that they hate talking to clients. It's because you've done something, you've put an effort into it, and clients tend to criticize it. So it's really hard to work with critics unless you're trained to do that. I love to work with the clients. I'm able to accept the critics, and the critics is a really good part, because it shows the pains that I can relieve, that I can unpack and see what's behind them. How can I assist to that? So that's why I guess it was a really good combination for me and my husband, because he hated to talk to clients, but I loved to talk to clients. So I used my strengths to work that out, both for the clients and for the creators. So I do believe that you have to work with, if you love talking to people, if you're an extrovert and you're a trained salesman, or you've got your prior experience in sales or something, that's good to be in position when getting all this kind of project going for the client. In rare cases, I connect the designer to the clients, where those are both technical guys and they just need, in a online workshop to move the things around and just discuss this and that. But in most cases, it just there must be a medium. I had this failed project where the client exactly complained about the manager, exactly because he hated to talk to manager. And that's what I realized, that okay, I didn't have to get this project with my team, because the client wanted to work with one designer. So for me, it's not a really good thing, because a designer has its pitfalls. So we would definitely that wouldn't work out eventually. So yeah, so I just figured it out that if you are creating a complex projects, you would definitely have professional to professional. There's you might find this article, how to manage communication within between teams. There's a diamond scheme where you connect the technical guy to a technical guy and a manager to manager. It works. It's perfect. So use it. It works for me. It works for an IT industry. So use it. It's really good.
That sounds fantastic.
So
yeah, that's very that sounds great. Okay, great. Any other questions before we sign off? Wow.
Yeah. So, sorry guys, it took me too long to.
Yeah, this could easily be probably 2 hours longer, but
Yeah.
I'm very conscious of everybody's time. I know it's late over there, and
is it because I've been plunged into darkness? 1 second. Okay.
Great.
I've got one. Can I just plug something real quick?
Yes, plug, please.
We have sorry, I haven't been talking for a while and I've forgotten how to speak. We've got a new version of Tracktion engine that's currently in beta. It's on the develop branch in the repository. So if you want to make audio timeline-based apps, go check it out. Just a quick rundown of the new things that's in there. There's a much improved API with stronger notions and types for beats and seconds and things like that. So going between the two is now much more obvious, and yeah, you'll be guided by the type system. And we have kind of built on top of that more dynamic notions of time. So we have real-time time stretching, so it happens on the fly, not using pre-rendered proxies, which includes our warp time engine, where you can move different parts of an audio file around. And we have a new beat-based MIDI playback engine. And on top of this, you can now like nudge time, so you can speed up or slow down using time stretching. And we also have implemented improved sample rate conversion using lib sample rate, which is kind of top-notch stuff. There's also more examples, improved demo runner, more documentation, more benchmarks, and more coverage, and lots of good stuff. So go check that out.
Wow. First, that sounds like that would be a fantastic talk. Another reason to have you back to talk about those improvements. Second, the warp time, is that proprietary, or is that using a licensed time stretching library under the hood?
So the warp time functionality is pretty standard. You basically say, I have time points and I want to move them, which gives you essentially a chunk of stretch ratios for your files. So they move at different rates. On the back end, that can be implemented in 3 different ways. We include SoundTouch, which is a sort of granular based time stretching engine. We have support for Rubber Band, which has proprietary license, but it's quite affordable if you're building apps and is pretty good quality. And we also have support for Elastic if you have an Elastic license. So you can use any of those 3 with all of the time stretching features.
Fantastic. Okay. Just as I said that there was a question that somebody had asked that I can answer. Tim Janik has asked, where do developers of open source audio plugins and DAWs find designers interested in participating for unpaid open source work? So something like that could, I will plug something of my own now, that can happen on the Audio Programmer Discord. So we have our Discord community where we have designers, developers of all different levels, interested in all types of projects. So Tim, if you want to join us on the Audio Programmer Discord, you can join at theaudioprogrammer.com/community, and we'd be happy to help. And with that, is there anything else we should mention? Before we run off. Cool. All right. We will see you on the next date, which is, do you know, Rachel? I see you scrambling for the state. I always forget to announce it. So it's the 13th of September.
Yeah.
13th of September. So the next date we'll be back is 13th of September. Be sure to join us for the Audio Programmer Meetup. We'll have some more tutorials, live streams, and so forth in the meantime. And with that, we will see you next time. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, we're offline. Thank you so much.